Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome, panel. So, Generation Z has been described as lazy, entitled, overconfident, vacuous, and lacking an attention span. But they've also been described as optimistic, community-oriented, authentic, great problem solvers, experience-driven, and of course, are the most tech-savvy generation to ever exist. Welcome to the paradox that is Generation Z. Generation Z is largely described as a group of people who were born after 1995. And I think the most interesting and salient factor about them is that they've been shaped and in turn is now shaping both technology and social media businesses around the world. They're, of course, in very different ways to the generation that has gone before them, most notably Generation Facebook, of which I'm a proud member. I think the panel today will really be focusing on two main things. The first is really to understand how brands can connect with Brand Z, a famously difficult and tricksy audience. But secondly, also looking forward to understand how Brand Z will influence the tech landscape in a much larger way going forward. So I think to kick things off, if each of the founders can just briefly introduce who they are and what their businesses do. I'm going to give you a 3-sentence cap though, so make it, and to mind the pun, make it snappy. Maybe let's start with you, Pri, or then we can work for the guys.
Sure. So you've heard from me a little bit earlier today. I'm Pri from Prima Donna, and we are a technology company that builds smart products and creative platforms for girls and women especially Generation Z. And our first big invention is the nail bot. So I did some of your nails earlier in the break. Happy to do more.
How long do you have? 3 seconds.
3 sentences.
Oh, 3 sentences. These are 3 seconds.
This is not Facebook.
Yeah.
Limited to 10 seconds.
Okay, cool. Hi guys, I'm Tim. I'm CEO of Fanbyte. We're a mobile video ad network for Snapchat. Although my beard doesn't show, I'm the youngest person here, which is always good to be. And we help a bunch of big brands engage with younger audiences through mobile video.
Hey, I'm Didrik. I'm one of the co-founders of Tailify. I'm also a millennial, so I'm not sure how relevant I am for the topic. But we connect brands together with influencers on social media. So we do play around with Gen Z on a daily basis. Hopefully we can share something interesting today.
Hello everybody, my name's Jared. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Vidsy, and I have a beard, as everyone here tends to have on the panels. Well, I just used up all my 3 sentences. But in very simple terms, Vidsy is helping global brands create mobile video advertising at scale. We really see our mission as disrupting the traditional advertising agency model, really eliminating all them time-consuming, resource-intensive operations with technology, and combining that with a global network of talented creators to produce content. It's kind of technology automates while humans create, and there's a lot of talk around AI today. Hopefully, creativity is the last thing that AI consumes.
Yes,
so, yeah.
Absolutely. I think to kick things off, the first question is going to be around who is Gen Z to you? So I think just from a personal perspective, and if you can bring any sort of data from your business or any interesting anecdotes from sort of the Gen Z people you engage with every day, who are they to you? So whoever wants to kick off first.
Look, I think like Gen Z is kind of just a bit of a label. The reality is that, we say it's like a certain age group and that kind of thing, but how many people here actually use Snapchat? So you're all basically Gen Z. It's like, it's more of a kind of mentality or a state of mind. The reality is my granddad sends like super awkward Snapchats to my sister all the time. Does that make him Gen Z? I think it's a nice label that we chuck on this for advertising, but I think it's more about how people interact with tech rather than your actual age group.
Actually, so while I was sitting in the chair over there earlier on and we were talking about AI, I started thinking about Gen Z as actually an AI. So if we look at my brain as an AI, I grew up and probably at around the age of 7 I got a PlayStation. So suddenly that was my interaction with technology. And then suddenly around age 10, computers came along and there was one thing, and I was at Google, I thought that was the internet. But then if you look at Gen Z, they've been growing up with technology since day one. So they've actually become super AIs when it comes to technology and understanding actually consuming media. And then for us who all work a lot with brands and how to then can reach these guys, they've suddenly become super AIs who can't really show and serve dumb things anymore. They've been so good at looking at tons and tons of content every day since day one. So these guys, we often call them with sort of a short attention span, but not really, they're just really good at finding exactly what they want. Now the good thing is they know what they want and they get slightly obsessed with that. Now that obviously portrays an interesting opportunity for brands, but you can't really do the dumb approach anymore because the AI has gotten too smart.
Where do I go from that? That was good. Well, for me, on a more personal note, I think I spend the majority of my time with, 10 to 18-year-old girls. Particularly, they want emojis on their nails or they want to decorate their nails. So I have a little bit more of a personal experience on that. But they're very bold, they're audacious. And, on the attention span front, I agree. I agree with the previous speaker said, but I think they like to take content, they consume it quickly, they know what they want, but then they want to make it their own. And I think that is something that really differentiates that generation, more so than any other generation. And so that's kind of our key thesis of our company too, as we're watching them kind of engage with our art, engage with our products. So they can absorb content very quickly, but they really want to make it their own and make it authentic.
Hi guys. So I guess we have a bit of a interesting perspective of this because we are like the audience that we are trying to help brands engage with. Interesting fact, the average age of our team is 21. So that's always fun going in against 45-year-old ad agency execs and saying, hey, let's take your money. But anyway, so I think a bunch of people talk about things like they're the first generation on the phone and they want everything now and all that. I think the kind of most interesting thing about Gen Z is this idea of like self-identification with anything at all, right? So it can be a self-identification with a certain cause, for example. That's actually why you see a ton of like social causes just completely take off when they are led by the younger generation because they identify with that, or maybe they also identify themselves with brands as well. So I think the kind of chief distinction, right, between Generation Z, Generation X, Y, Z, F, or whatever, right, is this idea of because of the phone, because of social media, it's much easier for them to have this sense of like self-identification with anything from like causes, brand. And once kind of people understand that's kind of like the chief distinction, campaigns become much better, brands engage with them in a much different way.
Excellent. So one of the interesting things I find about Gen Z especially is that they watch less than an hour of television every day. So they live online, they live through apps, they live on social media, obviously. How can brands meaningfully connect with Gen Z through social media?
So yeah, this is a bit of a layup considering it's exactly what we do. So if we look at how media in various forms has been consumed back in the days, and using television as an example, usually if you want to spend some time watching some media, you had to sit on the couch and at 8 o'clock your favorite show came on. Now that was it. Now this Gen Z generation has grown up with knowing exactly what they want, being able to choose that at any given point, so suddenly they can go in and curate their own feeds on various social apps, etc. Now suddenly you can actually decide exactly what you want and when you want to see it. So instead of the traditional way of advertising, as you try to create a bit of noise on the side of a screen or in the middle of a show to get the attention of the user, suddenly we know that these guys, the Gen Z that we're talking about, they've actually said that I like this, I like that, and I follow that person because, for instance, when it comes to nail polish, we know there's a huge community and huge influencers around nails, whereas the one you mentioned, who has, 3 million followers, we know that there's 3 million people following then her because they want to get inspiration on what to do with nails. So, and if you sell nail stuff, why not actually talk to this person, and get her to work with your brands and get her community to be interested in what you do? So it's essentially, as in, yes, they have a short attention span, they know exactly what they want to do, you can't bullshit them. What you can do is you can look at exactly what they like, work with them, and become part of the community. And if you do that, that's marketing times 10 in my eyes.
Look, I guess I totally agree. I think the interesting thing is that the way that you used to tell stories, if you're a brand, in that kind of format on TV, has been the same format they've used for the last 50 years. And mobile has completely disrupted that. Now you are pretty much, it's turned it on its head. You tell stories in very different ways. You don't have a 30-second slot anymore. You have 3 seconds. You have 8 seconds. You have to create with vertical video or square instead of this traditional landscape. You can use captions to actually bring in a whole different context to a piece of content or a story. And what it has done is it's also, yes, people might say Gen Z is the laziest, but I also think it's made them the most creative, because now they have all the tools to do all this really cool stuff, to tell stories in ways that we never thought was possible. And that's what brands, and I think the traditional agencies don't really get, is that you have to be super relevant, very authentic, and relatable when you tell stories. And I feel the best way, most of us up here, is by actually using the creators out there to produce that content. I think it's the biggest untapped resource of creativity out there, is all these amazing creators. And I think technology is allowing us to actually tap into them and create amazing stuff.
Cool. So I think there are like 3 ways, right, that things have changed considerably. So I'll kind of like talk very briefly about them. I'll give you a very interesting fact, and then afterwards I'll kind of talk about how we've done that in our own stuff. So if you thought about how like the old form of marketing was happening, right? So primarily it was very much like a mass marketing. Let's kind of like treat everyone as kind of these, pieces of data, and let's just hit them with one single message. And the kind of second form of it was a very like interruptive form of marketing. So how many people here, by like show of hands, can attest to, you're about to watch a YouTube video or you're reading an article and then randomly an ad just like comes in there and just completely disrupts your consumption experience, right? Show of hands, everyone should be up, come on, love that. An interesting stat, right? You are 495 times more likely to survive a plane crash than to knowingly click on a banner ad. Like, this is actually a fact, right? Google it, right? It's on Google, so it's true. And then the kind of third thing is that it's a very kind of transactional way in which brands used to engage with a younger audience, highly transactional. And if you think about things like retargeting, for example, right, the mindset was, hey, if I like constantly hit this person on all these various places, maybe they'll like buy my stuff out of like frustration. It's like, oh, for fuck's sake, stop chasing me, take my money, right? And if you think about that's kind of how like bad marketing was, then the best way to do it is the direct opposite, right? So where you have mass marketing is very much a personalized marketing. Where you have interruptive stuff is very much a native marketing. And where you have this kind of like transactional approach, you have a very like two-way dialogue there. And that, I think, is how brands should be thinking about engaging with younger audience. Just like a quick case study, right? Like one of our really good clients is Nickelodeon, and they wanted to launch like a TV show, and their whole idea was, tell you what, let's take $100 grand and let's like plaster it all on just like TV ads, Facebook ads. Let's just buy a bunch of ads. And what we just did was we created a really interesting concept using our ad network, where the show was called 100 Things to Do Before High School, and we actually got people to identify with the ad and then actually come up with one of the 100 things they had wished they had done before high school. It was a highly personalized, it was very much a like two-way conversation, and it was a very native ad format as well. And and that actually led to like fantastic results for them. So I think those kind of three things there, this idea of being personalized, this idea of being native, and this idea of it being like a two-way conversation, is essentially how brands should be thinking about engaging with that young audience. And those who don't, they fail.
Well, with that in mind, I think I'll maybe give a case study because I think I am a brand to some extent, right? I'm not necessarily, I can be, we're a community, but we're in some ways a young brand that we're all talking about. And we had to go to market, publicly when we came out of stealth with no money, right? It was all organic, no real spend. And so we did videos. It wasn't just, here is our prototype, what do you think? Gen Z and young millennials really like to see the process of the art being printed. So even as we were constructing our early prototypes and our early nail bots, it was, let's select an image and let's actually open, make the architecture a bit open so you could see the actual print, so that when we're taking live videos, when we're doing Facebook Lives, when we're on Snapchat, girls can actually see the prints. Can we take questions in as we're printing during Facebook Lives? And so we had to think in a very strategic way how to involve a younger audience so that we can be authentic, transparent, and it didn't necessarily need to be perfect for this younger generation. They really like to see the flaws too, to see the ways that we can improve and to tell that story. And so for us, it's been an interesting way as we've been trying to launch our own brand and our own community and kind of our own movement is, how do we stay authentic with our products, show that story with very little marketing spend? And we've really, I have a lot of interns that are even younger than you, that, they're digital filmmakers, but they're digital filmmakers with their cameras, right? And so that's really how we're going to market with very little marketing spend, and we're trying to do it in an authentic way.
Great. So the next question really is about how do you measure success of marketing campaigns across these new mediums? I think when you introduce variables like creativity, that's quite subjective, or communities, which is often also quite hard to define. How do you measure success and how do you sort of parlay that then back to your clients?
I'll take that one. So it completely depends. Now, often when companies come to us and they let's do a brand awareness campaign, we're often taking money from, let's say, television or print ads, where they usually have no clue what has happening at all. But the nice thing about social is so the primary metrics are looking at how many people has actually seen this and how many people have engaged with it. When we do successful campaigns, such as the one which Tim with Fanbytes did, where you actually engage the audience and you invite them into a community and you invite them in to become a part of your brands, that's when you start seeing really interesting results, which you can then obviously track and create environments around, either driving to people to certain accounts, hashtags, etc. And that's probably the most interesting way to properly measure and see the results from that. But then obviously as a company, we've worked with companies such as Disney and Unilever, where the case with Disney was they actually isolated a campaign and tried to see, okay, let's only spend money on influencers for one of our movies coming out, Magnificent with Angelina Jolie. And they saw that using influencers only compared to normally using television, etc., they had 70% more tickets sold than expected. Now, Disney said that's absolutely unheard of on a global level. Again, we did a case with Mayo for Hellmann's Unilever, where they want to sell more mayo via Instagram influencers. It's absolutely ridiculous. But if you do that in a creative, fun way with these guys, you can actually see results, whereas Hellmann saw a 23% in-store sale from this campaign.
Great. Jared?
Yeah, look, I agree, but I also think that the campaign model is kind of dead. Like, the reality is, when you're looking at results, you get this massive spike very quickly, but then what comes after that? I think success, and it can be measured in lots of different ways, lots of different data, but success is really building a constant conversation with your customers, actually building a relationship. And when we have friends, you don't just build a relationship with your friend by talking to them once every 6 months and then talk to them again. So I think, I guess, and this is how we define the success at Vidsy, is that how do we enable brands to have a constant conversation with their customers, actually build that and have fresh content consistently coming out and being able to do that at scale. And I think that in the end is how you actually win. And in the end, you're a brand, you're trying to sell shit. And that's really, building that relationship is what is going to sell.
Great.
Yeah, so I share like a very similar sentiment to Gerard here. I think that like fundamentally, right, as a business, if you're a mobile app, you're trying to get downloads. If you're an e-commerce store, you're trying to get sales. Like fundamentally, that's what it is. And the way in which you do that, I don't think, again, is, you know, from that spike. I think it has to do with, again, like building this community of advocates from your customers. That's where it gets way more interesting. I say this a lot in like events that I speak at. I say, I don't really care, right? By the way, listen to the like little change in what I'm about to say, right? And tell me if you get it, right? I don't care how many people see your brand. I care how many people see your brand, right? So there is a clear distinction between that. I do not care if you've got, you know, hey, we had 1 billion reach. Congrats. But if everyone just hates your brand, oh well, right? So it's all around how can we create this community of advocates from our consumers and our customers, and that's where things get interesting. Quick thing, I'll be quick. How many of you guys follow football here? Actually, that's a silly question. More importantly, how many of you guys know who Ronaldinho is? Excellent. So Ronaldinho is a customer of Fanbyte, and he essentially, I don't know if he was, you know, low on funds or something, but he decided basically, he remembers like 2 years ago, there was this whole like Segway craze, like everyone was riding these Segways. So he came out with 5,000 limited edition Segways of his, and he came to Fanbyte and said, hey, can you help me sell this stuff? I was like, you know, you didn't need us, but great stuff. And so what happened was, you know, did a whole cool campaign around this, and we got, you know, people to like, you know, do skills on their, you know, Segways and all that other stuff. And that completely sold out. So the Segways completely sold out. It got featured in like, you know, The Sun, Forbes, Lad Bible, etc. All this like crazy stuff. But the really cool thing, and the reason why I think it worked, was because we didn't just say, hey, get the Segway because, you know, like Ronaldinho is behind it. It was more, we actually kind of made people part of the actual conversation by saying, show us your tricks, like show us your favorite, you know, Ronaldinho moves or something like that. So we actually made them identify with a campaign, which actually turned them into brand advocates, which then got them to tell their friends, which then got them to their friends, and then that just kept spreading and spreading and spreading, and that's what actually led to them actually selling out of the Segway. So very much in line with what Gerard said, I definitely believe it's more a case of you build that community of advocates, and then those guys will help you get the sales, get the downloads, drive the email signups or whatever that you want. And I think that there is kind of the big distinction there.
I think the last question I really want to ask is about, it's quite easy to become quite enamored with an audience. They're going to be a huge market going forward. But what is the one tricky thing that you've learned along the way that you thought, wow, I didn't know that, now I know that, and this is how I overcame it? So what's quite tricky in marketing to Gen Z, and how have you managed to overcome it?
The bureaucracy that's involved in advertising is crazy. Look, I think as startups, and we're all growing and we all got a lot of traction, it is actually kind of really changing an industry and disrupting. Like, you know, you look at, I kind of feel like the model that Vidsy has is like what Uber was to the taxi industry, Vidsy really is to, you know, the advertising industry. And I think, you know, it's difficult to get big brands to really change their ways when they've been interlocked for so long in thinking a certain way. So you have to be super clever and think about ideas about how you actually convince them to switch, which is really difficult because you've kind of got the platforms like Facebook, Snapchat, you know, Instagram exponentially growing like this in terms of technology involving all the ad formats, and then you have consumers going like this, and you have these brands that are going like this.
Right.
And for us to grow, we basically have to pull these brands and pull them up so that we can kind of get that growth projection as well. So I think it's about how you convince these brands that this is the future and do it as quick as possible.
And at scale, of course.
And at scale, yeah.
I can't really add much to that. So we came into the advertising industry not knowing anything about advertisement.
Which is a good thing.
Yes, but it also means we get smacked in the face for the first 2 years of the company. We didn't understand anything. We tried to understand, well, this, as you say, it's not how many people, it's how many people. We don't call it impression, we call it moments, because there's a difference between someone randomly potentially seeing 30% of a buzz which goes by, and someone who actually gets something from someone they care about. It's still, yeah, we're working on still convincing people to understand the difference. We're actually planning on doing some studies with USAID and actually look at the brain and look at how we actually look at different forms of content from different type of people to understand this, but still, yeah, we're running up towards an old dust industry.
Well, I think because we're a new brand or a new community, it's kind of like white space for us. So it's very exciting because there isn't a traditional way of doing things for us. I think one of the challenges as Prima Donna scales, and we're kind of tweeny teen pop brand right now, but we become more mainstream, is at the end of the day, I also have to appeal to moms and dads, right, to buy the devices or to buy our products, if that capital spend is a certain amount. I think for us, it's, the audacity and the boldness of Generation Z is fantastic, but oftentimes they can be a bit fickle. And it's how to manage that and still position our brand and our company to where we can be mainstream and parents can still love us too. And I think it's a tricky road to ride on that one. But I'd say that's been the biggest challenge for us. The most exciting opportunity that I see is actually in the talent of Generation Z. I think that the girls that work at Prima Donna, they're extremely dynamic. They're coders, they're hackers, but they love digital art. They're models as well. And so I think because of that, I'm excited to see what they do.
Great.
Quick one. What was the actual question?
So the question is about if you've learned one thing of working with Gen Z.
Right. So I think the biggest surprise we had was how technology makes advertising to Gen Z so obvious, or so obvious. So just to give a bit of context, so I'm a computer science by training. And we have two other co-founders. One other co-founder is 20 and also a computer science by training. And then my other co-founder, he's also wearing this jumper. He's somewhere in the back here. Is 22 and has a master's from Imperial College on mechanical engineering, and he wrote a whole paper on mobile advertising stuff and got a first in it, right? And the crazy thing, I didn't realize how these three things actually will help us build an advertising company. Because I thought it was hey, creativity, let's, this is not to diss you, I swear, right? But creativity is important, right? But I didn't realize how you could just use a bunch of interesting things, taking a bunch of data points from campaigns that have worked and almost be able to reliably predict success of campaigns. That was a thing which I did not appreciate at all about the role that things like technology and data science could actually play in making campaigns in general, not only targeting Generation Z, but in general in making them actually take off. And I'm very grateful that we have a bunch of geeks leading the company, supposed to maybe a bunch of hipsters.
Great. I think to quickly wrap up, I'm going to ask the last question. It's a bit of an unfair question, but there's been a lot on the internet around it's almost like an arms race between Instagram and Snapchat. So the unfair question I'm going to ask all of you is literally Snapchat or Instagram in one sentence.
Or in terms of who's winning, hard to say. In terms of defining the two ones in one sentence, Instagram, aspirational, Snapchat, real life. Now, in terms
That's
of
one
who's...
sentence. You're done.
Sorry, I'm out. Or sorry, I'll give it to Mr. Snapchat man on the corner.
No, go first.
Such good manners.
Both, because we work with both of them. Look, I think it's not Instagram versus Snapchat, it's Instagram and Snapchat versus TV, because that's who they're really killing here. That's where they're taking all the advertising spend dollars from. So the question is, when do they actually kind of take over that media?
Go.
Yeah, I'd probably say both, and then can we add WeChat in there down the road?
Right, yeah, exactly.
For a larger demographic.
Yeah.
Sorry, really briefly, can I just say that was such a good answer? Like Instagram, Snapchat versus TV, that was a sick answer. Anyway, well, I wonder what I will say. Snapchat, and it kind of goes back to this idea. As I said earlier, Instagram, aspirational. I want to be like this person. Snapchat is I am this person. And I think there are very different ways brands can engage in both of those particular mediums. So yeah, that's my one sentence.
Great. Thank you very much, panel.